Oklahoma State University decided to change the logos, and so we've gone to the OSU brand for everything across the university. And also in the same email, they said we could start using Crystal Peak on stuff, but they haven't told us when and how to use it. So I decided to put Crystal Peak on everything I do until they tell me to stop. Anyway, OQBN is one of those programs that whenever I was in Arkansas for the last 20 years, I went across the border and, always thought that was a really good program. Probably didn't get as much use as it should. Now that I'm in Oklahoma, I've been kind of put in charge of the program, and we've got Jeff Roby. He replaced Kent Moore as the value enhancement coordinator, which is primarily the OQBN program. But he's going to be working on a master's degree with us and overseeing that program for the state. So this gets into who are our customers and what do they really want. And when we look at feedlots as the customers of our cattle, they really want semi-lots of matching calves. They want them lean, castrated, dehorned. They want them to be immunocompetent, which is just a big word to mean that they can respond to disease appropriately. And to do that, they really need to be vaccinated. To respond to the vaccine, they need to be dewormed and have a sound mineral nutrition program behind it. And the more we know about it, it's more than just the nutrition of the calf pre-weaning. It's also nutrition of that cow while she's carrying that calf that can have a huge impact on, the immunocompetence or the response of that calf. And they need to be familiar with water and feed sources so that they're not lost whenever they get to the feedlot. This is an example of some calves I bought in southern Arkansas whenever I was living there. The two calves on the top, there's a red mottle face that was horned, and he was an intact male. Yellow, solid yellow calf there, he was a horned, intact male. They were at 500 pounds, they brought $110 per hundredweight. Same day, same sale, we had these black knot face, the black, that yellow steer behind there. There's right behind those two blacks is this, yellow bull. They brought $1.35 a hundredweight. $25 per hundredweight discount because those calves still had horns and were male. And the more I look at it, having horns on those calves is just as big a discount nearly as being an intact male, it seems like, when we start looking at these sales. So when we look at different preconditioning programs, Superior, they have different levels. There's different levels in different areas of the country. We're looking at VAC 24, VAC 34, how long are they weaned, when are they vaccinated, and a lot of those types of things. OSU, we've gone with the VAC 45. This is actually the program for Superior, where they're wanting 2 doses of Clostridial, 2 doses of a 5-way modified live BRD, 1 dose of a Pastorella or Hemolytica or Maltasta, and internal and external parasite control. The OSU program has made some changes this year in consult with her new extension beef specialist, Rosalind Biggs. She started actually the day of the OCA convention. So we're really glad to have her on board and have her helping us with this program. So, when we look at that 45-day program, there's been a lot of research to look at that. The Iowa steer feed out test, they had 9 years and 2,000 calves go through there. If they were weaned for less than 30 days, they had a lot higher morbidity than calves that were weaned 30 days or more. When we start looking at these bigger calves going through the OQBN program or any of these programs, they're going straight to the feedlot, weighing 600, 650 and above. They're wanting those calves to be weaned 60 days or maybe even more. So they're really thinking that 45 days or that type of calf isn't enough to decrease this morbidity. So whenever we look at these factors that are related to disease, all this kind of goes into this preconditioning program. You know, we have a calf with naive immune system, and then we put all this stress on these calves. Weaning is a social stress. We're separating it from the dam. We all know that. But then we have handling stress. We're hauling those calves to the sale barn and commingling them. Then a cattle buyer buys them, and they're getting commingled again. They get to the ranches where they're going to be. You know, then we have a lot of transportation, and then environmental changes. You know, when do we wean these calves? October. When do we have our most variable weather? Probably October and November. We start having those really highs and really lows. So there's a lot of these stresses that are affecting these calves with that naive immune system. This is some research we did in Arkansas on John Richardson's PhD program. He is on faculty at West Texas A&M, and he's doing a lot of health research, especially focusing on feedlot health. But you know, his research program, you know, in Arkansas was looking at these stalker-sized calves, and you know, a lot of what he's doing today really applies to what we're looking at. So he had over 200 preconditioned calves that weighed about 5.5. They were from different ranches in Arkansas. Several of the university farms, one of the prison farms, and several bigger calf operators cooperated on this. Shipped them to a receiving pen. Different, you know, ranches came at different times, and then they had auction market calves that were close to the same weight. You know, mixed breeds, mixed sources. You know, steers and bulls weighing about 540 whenever they came in, but they came straight from the auction market. When we look at those preconditioned calves, you know, these cattle were already bunk broke, they're already weaned, you know, so we would expect them to gain a little bit more. But look at we had 10% morbidity, full morbidity of BRD. We had a third of the free treats and less than half of the chronics on those cattle. There was no difference in death loss. They didn't have a tremendous amount of death loss, but medicine cost and all those things really changed a lot. Preconditioning those cattle didn't knock out all of the morbidity on the cattle, but you know, 7% is a lot better than, you know, 70%. Plus, those cattle didn't get sick in the first week. It was later on in the preconditioning period when those cattle were sick. Another thing, this is done by Jeremy Powell in Arkansas with the calves off from his cow herd. He had 42 that he castrated at birth and 150 that he castrated at weaning. One of the reasons why a lot of cow-calf producers don't castrate earlier is they want to get, you know, the natural hormones to increase weaning weights. And the more we look at it, the less truth there really is to that. It's kind of a fallacy because these calves haven't reached puberty yet by the time we wean them at a normal weaning age. So the testosterone released from those calves. So anytime we do these trials where we wean these calves at 7 months of age, we don't see a big weaning weight response to keeping those calves intact. But once we wean them, look at the difference in performance we're getting from day 0 to 7 after we castrated. The steers gained 2 pounds a day, while those bulls didn't really gain anything. Over the first 80 days, we still had half a pound difference in performance, and when we took that all the way out to 220 days, we still had 0.2 of a pound change in gain. So those bulls never caught up. These are some cattle that came in from auction markets. We had 270 on this trial. Once again, steers gained more, we had fewer sick foals, but even more important, we had a lot fewer number 2 and 3 foals in them. So castrating added a lot of stress, made a huge difference on those animals. And this is I put this together. It's a retrospective look at about 9 different receiving trials I did in Arkansas, a friend of mine did in Mississippi, and then some that Gerald Horn and those at the Spark Center did in Oklahoma, where we were able to track those cattle through the stocker phase. So these were done between 2004 and 2018. There was over 1,200 cattle on this. Average weight on arrival was about 400 pounds. We received them in this particular set, we received them in a grass trap with free choice hay and about 2 pounds of supplement every day. And then they were kicked out on pasture, full season annuals or non-toxic tall fescue. Any of the cattle that went on the toxic fescue or were on pasture for a short period of time, we kicked out of this. So there were a few of those. So we had, anywhere from 36 to 34 days. There were cattle in Stillwater. This was a pretty neat trial. They had cattle coming in from 8 auction markets. They had groups that ranged from 2 to 121 from each auction market. So these cattle were really mixed up a lot. They had a tremendous number of sick foals at 70% VRD morbidity, at least one foal at least, and 8% mortality. Then there was 174 of those that went out on wheat pasture at Marshall and grazed for 86 days, and then they followed them through the feedlot to look at carcass. So when we put all those together, about 43% were untreated, 56% of that entire data set were pulled once, 25 twice, and 10% 3 times or more. When we compile all those studies together, during receiving, the cattle that were untreated gained 2.3 pounds a day. If we treated them once, we lost about a quarter pound a gain a day for that 42-day period. Treated twice, we lost 3/4 of a pound, and treated 3 or more times, we lost about nearly a pound of gain a day for that receiving period. But also look at the pasture gain. Even after receiving, those cattle were not chronics, or weren't identified to be chronics. We still saw a decrease in performance when we pulled them 2 or 3 times. And overall, the entire ownership during the stocker period, or receiving and pasture, we never caught up that performance because those cattle were sick. So if we can buy cattle that were not going to get sick, we would have quite an advantage with that. When we look at the finishing performance on those cattle here in Oklahoma, when they're received in the Spark Center, they feed a milled diet, it's in dry lot pens, more like a feedlot setting. Those cattle gained 3 pounds a day if they didn't get sick to BRD. Lost over a pound a day if they're only treated once. Lost 2 pounds a day if they're treated twice. On pasture, we only went to 1 or 2 treatments when we put those cattle out on wheat. So there wasn't any difference on pasture performance. There wasn't any difference on finishing performance, but over the entire lifetime, those cattle never caught up. We didn't see a compensatory gain on cattle that got sick. And a lot of us think if they're going to gain less during receiving or at any point in their life, we're going to get compensatory gain, and that's just not true in this case. Carcass weight never caught up. 878 pounds for those that were untreated versus 831. That's getting to be economically important right there. They were skinnier. We had a yield grade 3 versus 3.3, lower marbling score, and lower quality rating. So whenever we look at, those premiums for the OQBN program, it's gone up and down, but we're still right at $13 per hundredweight. So whenever Kelly Rayford put together these, she's looking at similar calves of similar weight that are not preconditioned or not announced to be preconditioned at the same sale. This does not account for an increased price for castrated males, increased price for dehorning. It also doesn't account for a slide for weight gain. We're going to wean those calves at 450 to 500 pounds. Hopefully over 45 days they'll gain 90 to 100 pounds. So there's going to be a slide for that weight gain. There's going to be a cost of feed, medicine, death loss, and risk of longer ownership on those cattle. I just put together for one of my just an example on some cattle. If we sell a bull calf at 460 pounds, this is based on OTC West last year actually in October. They were priced at $1.67. Net check would be about $753 on that calf. If we sell that calf at 555 pounds, 45 days later, that was $1.63. If we expect to get a $10 premium, which we should get, that $13 premium, that's $55. Assume a cost of feed and medicine and everything at $120. We're still making $72 for a relatively short, extended period of ownership. So it's still a very nice premium. And also, it seems kind of weird to say this, but it's the right thing to do. I was talking to Ken Thompson out of Kansas State, and I was like, the more I think about this, we're got a lot of producers that, if you have a puppy dog or something, they wouldn't give it to their neighbor unless they can guarantee it goes to a good home. He goes, yeah, all you have to do is tell our producers that aren't doing something like this, 10% of these calves you raise will die. And, that should make a difference, even if there was no economic premium to it. We're giving them a better quality of life for the rest of their time they're going to be on this earth. Because we have, the social stress, nutritional stress, commingling with the increased death loss. So the requirements for the OQBN program: they've got to be home raised. The bulls have to be castrated and healed. Dehorned animals with horns have to be dehorned and healed. They've got to be weaned the minimum of 45 days. They are asking for BQA guidelines to be followed, and we're also emphasizing that producers be trained BQA certified, but that's not a requirement. And then tagged with that official OQBN year tag. So we have 3 options currently available. The biggest change we've made to this is adding the ability to use a killed vaccine for some of those pre-weaning vaccines that had not been officially allowed previously. We're also, one of the things that's different is we're asking for Pasteurella pneumonia vaccine to be included at one of the times processing. We are requesting a modified live for those post-weaning vaccines, so we at least have one modified live in those cattle. At weaning, at least 63 to 65% of the cattle that go through the program go through this option 3. Probably the Cadillac that Dr. Kirkpatrick, the veterinarian, he's retired now, the university veterinarian that put most of these protocols together, he really likes to see this option 1 using a modified live both times. He says that gives us the Cadillac response as far as immune function. Um, Right now, we're only just recommending that these calves are dewormed and treated for external parasites. Um, I kind of think that's, one of the more necessary things. If we have cattle that are wormy, especially as wet as it was earlier in the year, we're gonna have a bigger worm load. One of the ways worms stay in an animal system is to decrease the immune function of that animal. So that parasites do decrease the response to vaccines. Clean, fresh water, abundant, high-quality hay or pasture. They need to be fed a concentrate supplement for at least 7 days, but if we're going to get the gain response we really need to make this economical, they need to be fed a supplement the whole time. Balanced mineral program, treated for cocci. And we really want those calves to gain at least 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds a day. It's an economic response for the producer. Those cattle that gain at least 1.5 pounds will look better at market. They'll probably bring that top end of the premium we're seeing. Cattle that are underfed and look rough have not gotten that full premium. Cattle that gain much more than that, they look too fleshy, and they also get discounted from that program. The OQBN sale dates I've got up here, and you cannot read that, but we have that posted on the internet. Most of the sales are the same as what we have had. The biggest change with this is Bill Barnhart at OKC West has requested that instead of having 2 discrete sale days for the OQBN program, he would like to do it every week, and for those cattle to be sold at noon on Tuesday, or the appropriate day if they're bigger, maybe on Wednesday. So those sales will start September 17th and be weekly all the way through January the 14th. So our first wean date has already passed for those sales. Is August 3rd, but that's a floating time, 45 days before whichever sale those cattle would wind up with. He said he didn't think it would be any more work than having a special sale. I think he got disgusted with some of the weather issues that were around his normal sale dates last year, and just having the opportunity to market when you think it's appropriate. He thought that would be a good thing and help build the program. We've also got sales at Cherokee, Woodward, those 3 sales at McAllister, Payne County, and Enid, and then Southern Livestock is the new name of the Blackwell sale. So with that, I appreciate the invitation to be here. It's always good to get out of the office, so thank you.
Have they done any studies on weaning calves in this heat?
I don't know that we've actually studied specifically that, but we have weaned calves in the heat on different research programs. Brought cattle in, from the southeast on that. Really the important thing, what do we have? Dust pneumonia, just heat stress from cattle walking and balling, all those kind of things. It's just important to use that husbandry of, adequate shade, clean water, those types of things. Not handling them during the middle of the day is also important. So,
well, what about the, said no QBN, but like on Superior, there's a lot of calves that'll sell through their unweaned calves, with a back 24, and then versus the back 34, where they've had 2 rounds of shot. Have you or anybody you're aware of done any studies on the economic value of that second round of shots?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. printed off a paper a few months ago where an economist had gone through all of the superior sales. And for each one of those, VAC 24 brings more than not preconditioned. VAC 34 has a premium over the VAC 24. By far the biggest premium is for their VAC 45 program. And there's also recently come out a study that showed with the Superior, when they announced BQA certified along with the vaccination program, there's an additional $5 per hundredweight bonus. So it's getting recognized to be an economic incentive to do those things right and to go with the that VAC 45. Superior has the VAC 45 and then the VAC 45 plus. I haven't seen anything to indicate if anybody has analyzed that additional benefit on that next higher level, but I can't tell you what those different premiums are right off the top of my head, but there is a difference among the three for sure.
Is that true when you bring them home? I mean, were you done the study and, like is a VAC 34, I mean, if you pay a $5 or $10 premium for those calves, is that gonna pay out in the long run, when you bring 2 loads at home? Start weaning.
The only one I do know is that VAC 45 that we did in Arkansas, and it really made a difference as far as gain and that morbidity response. I don't know if anybody's done anything to follow those other programs through. Maybe Clay Mathis at New Mexico State did. I'd have to go back and look.
In my experience with the different species, eventually these premiums all go away because these programs become the standard. And if you want to sell your product, this is what somebody's buying. And it may take a while in this business, but I think eventually, as you just mentioned a minute ago, it's the right thing to do. And consumer demands are going to move down the chain until eventually feedlots are going to say, this is what we buy.
I was at some meetings with some people with turkeys and broilers and hogs and everything else, and they've been having third-party certifiers come and observe their animal handling and all that kind of stuff for years. And they're like, oh, it's going to be a while for it to come to the States. Canada has instituted a feedlot program, and then within a year of having that conversation, Tyson and JBS and Cactus, Merck also was involved, put on a training for evaluators to look at at least the cactus yards. This year it's going to happen. It's going to be an open class for training these auditors, and it's already coming from Arby's and Wendy's and different retailers to have an auditor come and evaluate us, and those things move really fast. So yeah, it's no longer, it may not be a premium in the future, but if you don't do it, there'll probably be a huge discount. Different countries around the world, the United States, we have a good economy, and the better the economy is, the more people have money to spend, premium for something, and then they're not as hungry, so they're going to identify all these social things And it's gonna affect us before you know it.
I think, one of the farm magazines I was reading where, Walmart has, got with, 44 Ranch, and they're putting together a program, and they actually 44 Ranch can't service all of this, but, they intend to put, 100,000 head of cattle through this year. That will be a program from start to finish.
So they, can't think of his first name, used to have Jack's Ranch. His father-in-law was like CEO of Walmart, one of Sam Walton's first CEOs. And they had this famous ranch in northwest Arkansas. He's in charge of that. His son-in-law that used to manage that is in charge of that program, and it's just a pilot program. But they're still talking about 100,000 head, and they're talking about having dedicated, kill at different packers and all that. And it's not just Walmart. Costco has already started looking at building their own packing plant in Nebraska to give them, captive supply for different, feedlots there in Nebraska. So, they have people sitting, stockholders come to their board meeting and say, and they may be animal rights groups, but they show up at their board meeting and say, you're selling beef or chicken or pork that's being mistreated. And I was at a meeting where a guy from Costco was presenting. He was their sustainability officer, and he said, these people will buy 1 share or 5 shares or just enough to where they can show up to that board meeting, and then they have their seat at the table and they can come up with whatever they want to come up with. So we need to, as producers, whether it's National Cattlemen's Association, OCA, or just a group of producers, need to kind of do the same thing and get a seat at that table, but also do those right things so that we can respond to these people. And it really got me how those people are gaining access to the board of directors for these major corporations. So there's somebody with a minority, very small minority ownership in a company, 1 or 2 shares, that's steering the whole company, because the board of directors, they don't know anything about what we do.
On the sprayer sales, what I'm seeing a lot more of the naturals and NHTCs, and if you want the big premiums, that's where it is.
Yeah, and I'd say if a person, can capture that, we're the premiums that better be adequate to cover for, whatever we're not doing, for those cattle. But a lot of us, pre-calving are not doing a whole lot, as far as implanting or using Rumensin or what it not. But what bothers me on a lot of those programs is, well, I can't give an antibiotic, never ever antibiotics on these. Well, that's also an animal welfare issue, because we've got to treat our animals when they get sick. And so a lot of the consumers that are totally anti-antibiotics are kind of, because of one reason or another, that goes against, real good animal husbandry practices and appropriate treatment of livestock. Hopefully for those people that are interested in those niche markets, especially the feedlot, it's the feedlot where that they'd better get a lot of premium for those animals for the carcass, because if we're going the lifetime without growth promoting hormones or Rumensin or antibiotics, then we're really decreasing the amount of beef that we can produce. So
well, most of those naturals and stuff, they don't spend much time in a feedlot, or if at all, or not a big feedlot, because the feedlots with all the dust and the dirt and the mire, that's what causes the disease. I mean, and that's why you have to vaccinate against it, that's why you have to give them antibiotics. But a cow in its natural state, a calf in its natural state, out on grass, rotating around, which is what a lot of them are doing, they're doing rotational grazing. When they start doing that, and a lot of them are grass finishing, they're marketing their own. Now, if they market their own beef, you know, it never goes to the feedlots. And they can get by with that, and would not have to do antibiotics. But if your beef's going to a feedlot, you better give it the vaccinations and all that stuff.
And that's why these preconditioned cattle that are
Yeah.
in those programs are worth so much. And I would disagree with you. It's getting to be, with Whole Foods jumping in as big as they are, a lot of the major packing or major finishing operations do have natural lines and, you know, natural pans. You know, C.R. Freeman and Kirk Ruff out at Hobart, you know, they've got all natural feed yards. You know, they're not huge yards, but they are confined finishing operations.
Cattleman's choice feed function, natural cattle.
Yeah.
No,
So it's good to be more and more
Tyson's
common and
looking
less and
for-
less niche, you
Yeah,
know.
Tyson's looking to figure out how to do grass finish, non-feedlot grass
We
finish.
called and marketed some cattle out of Arkansas. We did a project where we actually fed grain on grass, you know, 1 to 1.5% of body weight, just cattle out on Bermuda grass, crabgrass pasture, and, you know, those cattle gain, you know, the cattle we shipped over here to Sparks on that trial, they gained 4.5 pounds a day. You know, they were, you know, 80% choice and 30% prime and that, all that. You know, the cattle we had on Bermuda grass through Arkansas summer, they gained 3 pounds a day, 3.3, something like that. Took them a month longer to get there. They were still 60% choice. And when we called and asked Tyson about, you know, killing this set of cattle, they were like, yeah, we got, you know, the buyer was actually out sorting cattle over by Ames coming off from grass. And she said, yeah, just, you know, load them and send them on. We had to be BQA certified, you know, thank the Lord I've made my herdsmen take the BQA certification because I hadn't got around to it yet, but at least we had somebody on staff because they weren't selling to anybody that wasn't BQA certified, and that was a couple of years ago.
What's BQA, beef quality assurance, is that
Yeah.
what that is?
So, you know, that's another one of those things. It's, you know, all the feedlots are, and all the people hauling cattle to those packers have to be BQA certified. And
There's
it's going,
online course for that too, and there are classes throughout the year, various places, but it's very straightforward.
It's pretty simple to do.
Yeah, and majority of it's common sense.
you know, it's the most
But
common sense
it's that
thing.
certificate you got. And,
So when you're buying cattle, what do you look for? Do you look for the person they came from, or are you looking at the price? Okay, Stanbridge, you're the cattle buyer in here.
Yes, all.
Yeah, all of that, all of that. I mean, does it make a difference if you bought somebody's cattle before and they, you know, done well for you and
They've
you?
done well if they haven't done well.
Yeah,
I can
so it
guarantee
makes,
a
when they
difference.
call their name out and you go, okay.
More of a narrow field question comment, but this European thing that Trump just announced, going from 15,000 up to 48,000 in 7 years. The EU, those have all got to be non-implanted cattle, so I don't know, everything coming out of the feedlots, they can't afford not to implant, so I'm not sure how much of that market.
Well, that gets back to the premium. The premium's got to be big enough, you know, to take up for, you know, what, 20% decrease in performance if you can't use antibiotics and hormones and that type of stuff. And it's there, I think, a good part of the year at least, for those all natural type cattle.
how long have you been doing the
That was
pastorality
the point I was trying to get across.
shot? That always been done at OQBN?
I think that has always been part of that program.
Has that significantly decreased the treatments in the feedlots down the road?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know if if that research is out there. Well, I'm sure it is, or else the vaccine companies. That is, well, I don't know that much about that one. That's not one I've looked into very.
Have you compared this, or are you familiar with the integrity fee program?
Yeah, I've talked to Robert quite a bit about that, and there are actually integrity beef requires everybody to be EQA certified. You've got to use bulls that are in the top 25% of the breed of certain breeds.
Like, female genetics are also involved.
Is that right? And I think their 45-day wean program is fairly similar. I don't know if they've,
It's 60.
is it 60 now?
60 and the shots are a little different.
Quite a few of those cattle, you know, whether it's they use the wrong bull or neighbor's bull got in, some of those cattle have moved over into the OQBN program. You know, if they get certified, most of the requirements are similar enough, they can be put over into it. One of the problems that, like at OKC West, where they sell those cattle, you know, they were doing the integrity beef cattle at the same time as OQBN cattle. And I think Kelly Rapert, the economist that collects all that data, she said the premiums are not that much greater for the integrity beef compared to the OQBN.
What about the traceability thing? Is it, you know, we have to tag each one of our calves so that we know where they came from?
So Rosalind Biggs, she's going to speak at our beef industry conference coming up in October about just that. And talking to her, when I did get a chance to talk to her at the Cattlemen's Association meeting, she said it's coming a lot sooner than what everybody thought.
I'm gonna try to do implants, 'cause my ear tags, they always fall out eventually. Like, maybe the kids don't, but by the time they hit cow age, they fall out, and I'm like, crap, which cattle was that? There's two or three of them fall
I
out.
think that gets into the, you know, the metal tag, or I think if they go with the electronic ID tag, they'll put it up here in the top of the ear where it's a thicker cartilage and not get ripped out.
Metal tags are going away, they're up.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Russ said last meeting that.
When they run out of them, they're out, they'll use them later.
We've got cattle up at
VHF
Fort
versus
Supply on that
VHF
USDA
tags,
station, and when they graze out in that sagebrush, they lose tags. I mean, they just can't keep tags in them, so they don't even bother ear tagging anymore. So, you know, I know it's hard to keep a tag in certain environments.
You may not want to tag them until they leave your farm either. They're not required to be tagged necessarily. But the traceability is back to your farm, so whenever they leave your farm, they may well have to be, if they cross the state line, they definitely will have to be.
What about branding? I don't know, we haven't branded in years, but some people still brand. I mean, does that affect hide value or anything? I mean, hides aren't bringing anything in, those
Well, hide's a substantial part of the drop credit, and you know, like in the EQA material, you know, they make a big deal about the rib brands. You know, on the corners, it's not affecting the biggest part of the
Do the
hide,
hip or the shoulder?
hip or shoulder. And you know, everybody always brings up freeze branding. It also kind of defaces the hide too, so it's just as bad as far as hide value as a hot iron brand.
There are some states that still require it. New
We
Mexico,
used to
you
have
have to be.
electric brand and it got the shock on. That's when we get it fixed.
Take it over here and get, he sends them off and fixes them.
I don't know where the thing goes. Dude, I hadn't seen
I
it in
think
years.
mine he's fixed over there.
Pretty good.
I'm sure you're probably aware of it, but something else is coming up, there's been quite a bit of publication on it. The brand registration has been $20 for the last 40 years. It's been proposed to increase it to $40, effective, it's a 5-year registration, and it'll start again the first of January is when the new registration. But anyway, based on all the costs going up, they've been losing money, quite a bit of money, being the registrar for $20. So there's a proposed comment open right now. Anybody wants to comment in good, bad, or indifferent, it's an open comment where you can send it in on the internet right now. It'll be voted on by the OCA Board of Directors, I think on the 13th. Anyway, if they have, it's a consideration, and it's one of those things that, no doubt in my mind, it's gonna go forward. And then it'll go out, draft public opinion now, and then it'll go out for further discussion. But it's one of those things that look like it's gonna happen just because of the cost of doing business over all the years. If you got a comment on it, you can send it in.
That's gonna affect your bottom line, you're in trouble anyway.
None of us want it to go up, but I want it to stay in, I mean, I think we want the program, so I mean, we have to pay for it.
And we're talking about how valuable it is to producers. Everybody that does it, the producers all want it, so they don't think there'll be that much resentment on to justify the price.
$40 is still pretty very
I
cheap.
mean, that's why I say,
5 years.
I don't want to pay
5
more,
years.
but it's the cost of doing business. You
Yeah.
just gotta do it.
$8 a year is all you're paying for it.
Going down on the country. Not every day.
How many counties you president, Steve? On that $40 for 5 years?